We are the kind of creature that when we come into an environment, we adapt to it. And that's generally a good thing. If you walk into a library and everyone's quiet, you should also probably be quiet. You walk into a bar and people are having loud conversations, and you can have a loud conversation. That's part of being human. But we also have to have this higher level mechanism which tells us when we shouldn't adapt. And if we don't have that, then we're in trouble, right? Because you know something about history, because you know a little feeling in your stomach that something's wrong, because you know somebody else who's been hurt, whatever reason, recognizing that this is a situation where you shouldn't just go along.
This is Hourglass, the podcast for United Way of King County in Seattle. Coming up, a conversation with historian and best-selling author Timothy Snyder. United Way is partnering with Seattle Arts and Lectures to co-sponsor an evening with Snyder at Benaroya Hall on October 26th as part of our Conversations for Change series. Hourglass sat down with Snyder for a conversation about his book, On Tyranny, 20 Lessons for the 20th Century. We'll discuss the origins of On Tyranny and its lessons that inspire people to engage in acts such as defending our institutions, standing out for one's beliefs, and contributing to good causes. We'll also discuss our upcoming free tax preparation campaign and a local volunteer opportunity. I'm your host, Joe Burris. Thanks for tuning in.
These institutions, they are temporary. They can be broken. They can be used against you. And so if you want to resist, if you want to be free, if you want to get through this, you have to take a side. You got to pick something. You got to say, okay, I'm going to help my local chapter United Way. I'm going to help my local newspaper. I'm going to help it can be a sports team. I mean, it can be a lot of other things. It doesn't have to be something directly political, but you have to get on the side of something.
In November of 2023, United Way of King County closed its account on the social media website X, formerly known as Twitter, amid ex-CEO Elon Musk's hate speech and vitriol, culminating with his anti-Semitic posts. In July of 2022, we called attention to the Seattle area's history of restricted housing covenants that once excluded Blacks, Asians, and Jews from purchasing property in certain neighborhoods. Last year, we denounced the U.S. Supreme Court ruling that said people experiencing homelessness can be arrested and fined for sleeping in public places. And this year, we've spoken out against the federal government's proposed cuts to SNAP and the U.S. Department of Education. We work tirelessly to support our neighbors who don't have a place to stay, don't have enough to eat, lack financial security, and need a quality education. But we also advocate for those who have been marginalized, oppressed, mistreated, or denied equal protection under the law. Our work is guided by a deep-seated loathing for injustice in all forms and a desire to support the victimized and vulnerable, particularly victims of systemic racism and residents often shut out of our region's economic prosperity. As we continue to embrace an equitable future for everyone, at a time when the laws that uphold our freedoms and our rights are being called into question, United Way is proud to team up with Seattle Arts and Lectures for an event featuring historian Timothy Snyder, author of the best-selling books On Freedom and On Tyranny, 20 Lessons for the 20th Century. The event will be held at Benaroya Hall in Seattle on October 26th, beginning at 7:30 p.m. Snyder is a former professor of history and global affairs at Yale University and a current professor at the University of Toronto's Munk School of Global Affairs and Public Policy. Snyder teaches on topics such as European political history and the Holocaust, and his writings offer critical looks at concepts such as freedom, authoritarianism, and sovereignty. Both of his books, On Freedom and On Tyranny, have appeared on the New York Times bestseller list, the latter of which has remained there for more than 140 weeks. Snyder's publisher, Penguin Random House, says Snyder's work has inspired sculptures, a punk rock song, a hip-hop song, and an opera, and he has appeared in more than 50 films and documentaries. United Way is proud to co-sponsor the October 26th event with Seattle Arts and Lectures as part of our Conversations for Change series. Conversations for Change features discussions from experts and scholars on issues impacting our community. Hourglass recently conducted a virtual interview with Snyder, who said that during the Conversations for Change event, he will speak mainly about the book On Freedom, which delves into the concept of freedom and how it's often misunderstood. But for our podcast, we asked Snyder to discuss On Tyranny, namely the origins of the book, how it speaks to today's political climate, and several of its 20 lessons that encourage people to engage in acts such as defending our institutions, standing out for one's beliefs, and contributing to good causes. Here's what he had to say.
I've spent decades writing about some of the worst episodes in human history. And then I was spending the 2010s writing about Russia and Ukraine and the spread of what I thought of as a new form of fascism. And that all of that was already on my mind, the historical examples. And then this contemporary international trend, which seemed to have something to do with attention span and oligarchy and social media. I was thinking all of that when Trump was elected in 2016. And that's what led me to write On Tyranny. So I sort of dropped everything else and I spent a couple weeks writing On Tyranny. But the other thing, of course, is that I watched Mr. Trump campaign with the eye of somebody who thought this could be something like what I've seen before, either in history or somewhere else in the world. I wasn't thinking this was normal, and it wasn't, of course, normal. And so on the basis of his campaign, I thought, okay, we should do something quickly. We should conceptualize this quickly. And that's why I wrote On Tyranny.
And what went into coming up with the 20 lessons from the 20th century?
Well, that's a real good question. I haven't thought about that for a while, but I had 10.
Oh,
and then I came up with a few more.
Oh, wow.
Okay. And I thought, you know what, 20 would be a nice round number. So there was a quick process where I was talking to my friends and talking to my spouse and coming up with the particular things and trying to get them in the right order. It started with the Facebook post, which came out a couple of days after he was elected, or maybe the next day. And then I moved some of them around and changed the order a little bit. But I was trying to do it in a format where each one would be meaningful, but there wouldn't be too many of them, and where each one would have a historical example. So that's about as much as I can tell you.
Okay. And how painstaking has it been to relive some of the horrors that you speak about? And I know in one of your books, you also talk about a tragedy that happened around the same time as the birth of your first child. I mean, how when you started writing this, I mean, what was that like?
I wrote, I don't mean to dodge your question, and you can pursue it, but I wrote On Tyranny trying to make things better.
Okay.
Right? And then the more recent book On Freedom, the one I'll be talking about when I get out there, to Kings County, I wrote it to try to make things better.
Okay.
And even when I'm writing history books that are not political or philosophical, I feel like I'm doing something constructive because I'm trying to show what can happen. And I'm trying to solve, intellectual problems. I'm trying to help us understand ourselves. So I don't feel traumatized doing this kind of work.
Okay.
There are difficult moments, but I feel like I'm doing something constructive, and that's kind of my basic attitude about the whole politics of this. It's that terrible things are happening, and you kind of stand where you have some leverage yourself, and you do the things that you can do. So I guess there are other subjects that would be more pleasant, but I write about things I write about because I think they're important and worthwhile. And that makes me feel good about what I'm doing. And then in politics, the trick is that you always do stuff with other. This. You're in an organization, but you do things with other people, and other people are. There's always somebody who's cleverer than you, and somebody who's more courageous than you, and somebody who's a better organizer. And so you let yourself be inspired by other people, and that feels differently than being alone.
Great. Now I want to quote some of the passages of your book, and I want to expound on them for our listeners. The first is probably my favorite line. History does not repeat, but it does instruct. Anyone does a search term on words like oppression, conformity, authoritarianism, slavery, censorship, I mean, even freedom and resistance. It seems like there's so many examples throughout history, and even in our current moment, where it's like, this feels like deja vu, right?
Yeah.
So can you expound on that a little bit?
Yeah. No, I'm sympathetic because when people say history repeats, they're usually trying to say a good thing. Like they're usually trying to say, like you said, this reminds me of something.
Right.
And that's true. Like that's what history is for. History tells us that nothing is completely new, right? There's always a familiar element, and the familiar element is what you can get hold of as you try to understand the things that are unfamiliar. So I think it's basically a positive thing when people say that history repeats. But the reason I would never say it repeats, literally it doesn't repeat, of course, but I would never say it repeats because when you say it repeats, it makes it seem like, it's a song that you decided to hit play on again. Or it's just like the radio is playing the same song again. And it's not like that, because history involves the things that we ourselves choose to see and react to and do. And so that's why I prefer instruct, right? If you know something about something in the past, then you can recognize that, wait a minute, this is instructing the tyrants.
Right.
They're learning this, whether you learn from it or not, they're learning from it. Like we can say, oh, the history of, the history of Jim Crow doesn't matter, or the history of Nazi Germany doesn't matter. We can say that, but the people who are trying to change the United States into a certain kind of regime, they know that history in their own way. Mm-hmm. And so history instructs them, and then history instructs us, because history instructs us to say, okay, this is how it can go down, and this is how people can resist. And so it becomes you can't just allow history to flow. You have to say, okay, it's instructing me so that I'm empowered to do number one, number two, number three.
Great. And then I want to go, that was of course from the prologue, the lessons, and the one I've heard repeated most often is lesson 1. Do not obey in advance. Most of the power of authoritarianism is freely given. In times like these, individuals think ahead about what a more oppressive government will want and then offer themselves without being asked. A citizen who adapts in this way is teaching power what it can do. Talk about how that speaks to this time that we're in right now. And I should say not only this country, but the world over.
Yeah. Well, it's a general human lesson, right? That's the thing. History instructs, but also self-knowledge instructs. We are the kind of creature that when we come into an environment, we adapt to it. And that's generally a good thing. If you walk into a library and everyone's quiet, you should also probably be quiet. You walk into a bar and people are having loud conversations, and you can have a loud conversation. We adapt, and that's part of being human. But we also have to have this higher level mechanism which tells us when we shouldn't adapt. And if we don't have that, then we're in trouble, right? And so don't obey in advance is about recognizing, because you know something about history, because you know a little feeling in your stomach that something's wrong, because you know somebody else who's been hurt, whatever reason, recognizing that this is a situation where you shouldn't just go along, where you have to have your own sense of what's normal. So normal isn't just everything that's happening, but normal is what's normal to you, right? And the reason why I don't obey in advance is number one, is that it comes before everything else. You have to stop and kind of dig your heels in and look around and say, okay, this is not normal to me. I'm not going to go along. And from that point forward, you can do a whole bunch of other things. But if you fail there, then you're not going to be doing a whole bunch of other good things.
Great. Okay, so lesson 2, defend institutions. It is institutions that help us to preserve decency. They need our help as well. When you're living in a country where you can have a tragedy and then the repair is so quick that you might not even see the remnants of that tragedy. How hard is it for people to understand that that institutions can go away and therefore they need to be defended?
Yeah. I had a couple things in mind there. One, this goes back to your first question about what I was thinking in 2016. I was thinking a lot of people would obey in advance. And I was also thinking a lot of people would say institutions will save us. And that's what a lot of people said. I mean, I don't want to pat myself on the back, but that's what a lot of people said. That's what a lot of people keep saying. And I was trying to head that off, right? Because institutions are only as good as the people who are inside them, who care about them, who are trying to inform them, fill them up with some kind of moral content. They don't act on their own. You know, they're not robots. They're only what we make of them. And yeah, you make a good point about not about all Americans, but there are a lot of Americans who think that the institutions are just kind of there and they take them for granted. And they've always kind of been on my side. So what could possibly go wrong?
Right.
That's not true of all American experience, of course, but it's true of what some folks experience our country as being. And that's what the lesson is for. The lesson is there to say, well, look, these institutions, they are temporary. They can be broken. They can be used against you. And so if you want to resist, if you want to be free, if you want to get through this, you have to take a side. You got to pick something. You got to say, okay, I'm going to help my local chapter United Way. I'm going to help my local newspaper. I'm going to help it can be a sports team. I mean, it can be a lot of other things. It doesn't have to be something directly political, but you have to get on the side of something. And this is the final thing, which is important. Defending institutions means you're going to say, okay, this thing isn't perfect, but I'm going to get on its side. I'm going to help it out. I'm going to lean forward, as opposed to saying, this thing isn't perfect, and I'm going to complain, but it's not defending my freedom enough.
Kind of segueing to that, I love the one, lesson 8, stand out. Someone has to. It's not easy to follow along. It can feel strange to say something different. But without that unease, there is no freedom. It kind of traces back to something else that you said. A generic cynicism makes us feel hip and alternative, even as we slip with our fellow citizens into a morass of indifference. As you've done this, you basically are standing out. What kind of cynicism or objections have you received from On Tyranny?
I wasn't expecting the turn that the question took at the end there. So let me riff for a while, and then I'll try to answer it. Because it's really, this feeling of discomfort is really important. That for most people, resistance is going to feel a little bit uncomfortable. And that's normal, and that's good. Like freedom always feels a little bit uncomfortable because it always means that you're not doing what everybody else is doing. You're not taking your cue just from what's happening around you. And in the setting we're in, where our government is doing increasingly violent things, like they're trying to make that normal, right? Like, so tearing everybody out in an apartment building in Chicago, everybody, right? They're trying to make that normal. And it can, even though, and but it still takes a little bit of courage to say, hey man, that's not normal for me. That's not okay. That I'm going to protest that, right? So every time, like what they do is they try to change the world, to change your sense of normality. And what you have to do is continue to be your weird self. You have to continue to be the self that you actually are. Because without that, then you can't do the necessary things. Me and standing out, I don't know. I mean, first of all, I should say that like there are so many millions of people who stand out more than I do. There are so many people who take many more risks and are much more creative than me. And like all the stuff that I do, insofar as it's useful, is in cooperation with other people who are usually in some way, more interesting than me. And I can't say that it's really effective. I mean, I'm in a very privileged position. I'm like a tenured professor guy. I mean, people criticize me. I don't know. Like, I get like my share of, I get my share of generic, like, abuse and threats, and I get that stuff. I do get stuff. But I don't know. It doesn't amount to very much. I don't know. You can push me, but I don't think I have much to complain about.
Good. Okay, well, this as a former 30-year journalist, this is one of my favorites. Subsidized investigative journalism by subscribing to print media. Journalists are not perfect any more than people of other professions are perfect, but the work of people who adhere to journalistic ethics is of a different quality than the work of those who do not. What do you, I don't want to get into what you don't read, but what do you look for? What do you read?
Yeah, that's a good question. I just want to. Sorry, I'm coming out of a bit of a cold here. It's I just want to emphasize the point that reporters are people, and they're special kinds of people. That your earlier question was about risks. Reporters are always are even reporters just covering local news. If they're really covering, they're taking some kind of risk,
Right.
because people don't really want the truth. People want things to be easy. And reporters who are trying to figure out if the water's polluted or if the city council is corrupt or whatever, they're taking risks.
Mm-hmm.
Some of my closest friends are war journalists.
Oh, wow.
And they're taking physical risks. But it's all in the same spectrum. Like anybody who's out there looking for the truth is taking some kind of risk. And it's the humans who take risks. Like they're the people we have to treasure. People that can repeat and plagiarize and so on. And what strikes me about you mentioned the morass and how everybody can write anything. That's true, but also the machine itself just auto plagiarizes, right? Like anything which goes up, which some human labored to figure out, is immediately repeated in all kinds of other fora. But the only thing that ultimately matters is that individual human being who's trying to figure out the truth. That's what I just wanted to say that before I answered your question, because I don't think we treasure the reporters. I don't think we treat them the way that we ought to treat them.
I know.
So what do I read? And this is not meant as like, there are lots of things I should read that I don't. But I subscribe to the Guardian Weekly. I subscribe to the Financial Times. I subscribe to The Week, which is an American digest of local and national and world news. I subscribe to Wired. I subscribe to The Verge. I subscribe to 404. I subscribe to the New York Times. And other things that I'm no doubt forgetting right now.
That's okay.
But you already made the important point, which is like, it's good to pay for this stuff. Like it's 20, like not everybody can, like I run I have a Substack, and like most people who subscribe, I should, almost nobody pays for it, honestly. And that's cool with me. I've got other jobs. But in general, it's really good if you spend that 20 or 30 or 40 bucks a year subscribing to something, because that allows, there are a lot of these smaller new media now that are doing real reporting. And they can only run if we subscribe. Right. Like directed by the Washington Post, that's one thing. But then if you've got these other new groups that are doing real reporting, man, we have to do our part and pay for it.
Just two more. This really speaks to us at United Way. Lesson 15. Contribute to good causes. Be active in organizations, political or not, that express your own view of life. Pick a charity or two and set up autopay. Then you will have a free choice that supports civil society and help others do good. At United Way, much of our work is around food and housing, rapid response, and long-term systemic root cause, addressing those. But we also this year, we have spoken out against policies that will harm people that receive SNAP benefits and put more people in poverty. We're doing that at a time when nonprofits are being targeted for that very thing. What would you say to nonprofits doing advocacy work, activism work that really does shed a light on injustices at their possible jeopardy or imperil?
I'm going to answer that, but I'm going to say something else first. We should, I'm just repeating the lesson, like we should be given money, like not the people, So the political scientists, one of their arguments for why America shouldn't go authoritarian is that we're still wealthy. Okay. And now there's some problems with that. Like one of them is that our wealth is very unevenly distributed, but we do have a very big middle class. We have a lot of folks who can afford to give money. And people ask, like, what can I do? And there are a lot of things you can do. You can protest, you can organize, You can, you can talk about the things where you've got some expertise. You can talk to strangers. Anyway, we're talking about On Tyranny. All this stuff is On Tyranny. But one thing that not everybody, but one thing that a lot of folks can do is give money to non-government organizations, support civil society. A lot of us can do that. That's a relatively easy thing we can do. And it doesn't have to be directly political, but it's about keeping up. It's about keeping things working. It's about keeping the fabric of society together. So I just wanted to emphasize that point before I answered your question. I'm not an expert on American law, and I don't want to give legal advice about, what you should say or shouldn't say. But there are two things. One is that it's impossible in this situation not to say anything. And the second is that it's important to stick together as, United as itself a kind of coalition. So all this, but whether it's universities or, civil society groups, whatever it is, it's important to try to create a big front and have some common norms and try to do things together and to stick up for one another. But yeah, I don't think we can get through this without being positive about ourselves. We can't just wait for them to sue us. We have to be positive about ourselves and remind people the good things that we're doing.
Great. Last question, and it's the last lesson. Lesson 20. Be as courageous as you can. If none of us is prepared to die for freedom, then all of us will die under tyranny. I thought this one was interesting because that is all that it said. And we didn't really, unlike the other ones, this is the defining. You mentioned earlier why do not obey in advance was the first one. My last question is, why was this one the 20th?
Well, I appreciate your careful interrogation of this book, because I did put some thought into the structure, and I haven't had that many occasions to actually talk about it. So I appreciate that. I mean, I talked about the book a lot, but the form of it, I haven't talked about that much. And you're right. There's a reason why that's the last one. And that's because I've already worked through the whole trajectory of things you do at the beginning, things you do at the middle, right? Things you do at the end. There's a kind of logic to all this. Don't obey in advance has to be at the beginning, because if you don't do it at the beginning, you're not going to do any other things. And then you move through to some of the everyday things. And then toward the end, it gets a little more drastic. And we're talking about, moments that are more like the moments that we're in now. Be as courageous as you can is the end, because I can't define too much what that's going to mean. But also, it's at the end, because at the end of all of this, when we learn everything we can from the past, when we collect the examples that we can collect, at the end of the day, there has to be that little bit of courage. For some people, I know it's a lot of courage, but you can't do it without a little bit of courage, without a little bit of moral spin. You can't do it. And so be as courageous as you can is in some sense like a counterpart to don't obey in advance, right? It's going to take courage a little courage at the beginning. It's going to take a little courage at the end. And at some point it has to be as much courage as we can provide, but we can't do it without the courage. We can't delude ourselves that we can do it without the courage. So that's why it's there. I mean, I'm sending the reader off. I'm saying by the time you get to lesson 20, maybe things are pretty tough. And so this is I'm wishing you well. And I'm saying there are a lot of tools, there are a lot of techniques, but at the end of the day, we're going to have to all be courageous in the ways that we can be courageous.
Awesome. Timothy Snyder, thank you so much for participating on Hourglass, being our guest on the show this week. Really appreciate you and all your work.
Okay, great. Looking forward to being out there. Thanks a lot.
For more information about the Timothy Snyder event at Benaroya Hall, log on to our website at uwkc.org/events or the Seattle Arts and Lectures website, lectures.org. United Way of King County's free tax preparation campaign is gearing up for another tax season. Funded by United Way, the IRS, and the City of Seattle, United Way's free tax prep service is for individuals who make up to $80,000 a year or up to $96,000 for non-single filers. United Way tax prep specialists help clients understand their tax situations and take advantage of benefits such as the Earned Income Tax Credit and the Working Families Tax Credit. In 2025, United Way served 18,200 of our neighbors, helping them access more than $16 million in tax credits and refunds. United Way tax sites will open on January 25th, but currently we are seeking volunteers for more than 20 free tax prep locations throughout King County, including sites at the downtown Seattle Library and in South Center Mall, as well as our virtual tax site. Volunteers are fully trained and IRS certified. To sign up, log on to uwkc.org/taxvolunteer. And for another local volunteer opportunity, University District Food Bank is looking for volunteers to help assist in serving food insecure members of our community. If you have just a few hours a week to give, you can make an impact on people's lives. The food bank has opportunities on Monday through Saturday, with some shifts during evening hours. For more information, log on to udistrictfoodbank.org/get-involved. At United Way of King County, we are working side by side with communities to build an equitable future for everyone. Hourglass United Way is a podcast that highlights how we and our partners spend time making a difference in our communities. Our work is made possible by the generous donations from people like you. Please send comments and suggestions about our podcast to hourglassunitedway@gmail.com. To learn more about our work or to support United Way, log on to uwkc.org. I'm your host, Joe Burris. Thanks for listening. Until next time.